Oh yeah, it's been great. You want a pillow or anything?
No, no, I'm gonna stand up.
Oh, welcome. Good evening, everybody. Great to have you here. And it is fantastic to have Rick Telander here. He's been a columnist, a sports columnist at the Chicago Sun-Times for almost 30 years. And before that, he had a long stint at Sports Illustrated. And when he wrote there, it was the gold standard of sports writing and sports journalism. And Rick has interviewed Michael Jordan. He's been to Super Bowls. He's covered a lot of big events over the last 50 years. And unlike most sports writers, Rick was actually a very successful athlete as well. He was a All Big Ten quarterback at Northwestern, and he was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. Um, Unfortunately, he did not make the team, but the good news was he became a sports writer after that, and maybe somewhat of a result of being cut. And for years, Rick lived near the west end zone of Lake Forest College, off the near the football field. And some of you may think, well, who cares about that? But that was back when the Bears trained there. So Rick had a front row seat of everything they were doing. And hopefully, a lot of you watched the Bears game today, saw an amazing comeback. Thanks to the special teams and the defense, maybe not so much the offense, and our number one draft choice, but he'll get better, I'm sure. Anyway, Rick's here to talk about the Bears, other sports topics, and also his relatively new children's book called Sweet Dreams. So, Rick, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a neighbor above all. I've lived there for 32 years. And we used to be able to hear when the bands are playing. Hold on, I put some notes over here. When the bands, you'd have great bands here. I don't know how long you people have been members, but I remember seeing, I think it was the Temptations. We'd ride our bikes over, Judy and I, go out to the tent, pretend like we belonged and just listen. Temptation, I hit the Beach Boys one time. It was something, oh, I did a Willie Nelson. I don't even know who all. It was amazing. So we can hear it on a beautiful summer night. And it's a wonderful place. Been here a jillion times for weddings with friends, for sporting events, all that kind of stuff. But I am a sports writer by trade. It's a good thing that Hank Stram cut me as he did. It's kind of interesting to me as I reflect on this stuff. Our defensive backfield coach, I was a position that doesn't exist in the NFL anymore. Seriously, it's called white cornerback. There aren't any. There haven't been any for almost a quarter century. So anyway, I think Hank was onto that. Okay, why don't you start it, Rick, and get the hell out of the league? Anyway, he was a coach and general manager, and the assistant coach came to talk to me. He said, "Hey, Rick, this is partway through training camp. There have been waves of top scouts getting adios. That was back when they had 17 rounds in the draft. And they used to have a Mr. Irrelevant. I think it started my year or the year after. So you were 17th, last pick of the 17th round. You were irrelevant. I'm going 7 rounds. And you see, the starting quarterback for the 49ers was Mr. Irrelevant, so to speak. So I disregard that. I was right there in the middle. I know, having looked it up, that I was actually taken, if you go just numbers, not the same year or anything, before Tom Brady. So that's all I have in common with that. But anyway, he said, why don't you I think it's time for you to get on with your life. And, we're going to let you go a little early because so you can go to law school, which I mean, told me that's a negotiating point, Rick. Go in there when you talk to Hank, when you first sign your contract. I said, what do you tell them? How do you get more money? Because that's the whole thing. You want every penny you can. He said, tell them you go to law school if they don't pay you more. So I did. I remember, and Hank looked at the contract, which was like I think for $14,000. And he said, okay, we'll give you 500 more on your bonus. So I got $3,000, which was incredible. But he took the 500 off of my contract in case it made me. So that was my negotiating point. And to get hung with that, when I finally get cut, I'm like, Like I couldn't tell him that. So anyway, I said goodbye, left that, and anyway, it was a good thing because I probably would have gotten crippled. It ruined my knees as it is just from playing pickup basketball, which I truly love. And it's like you get 40,000 miles on your tires, and you wear out your joints and you get new ones, or you just deal with it. But it's got to be worthwhile the miles on the tires, and it was for me. Well, anyway, that was the start of it all. And watching a game today, the Bears game, of course, I've seen hundreds of them. The main thing everybody focuses on with the Bears, of course, is a quarterback. They're looking for a quarterback since Sid Luckman. And that was 1950. I don't even remember that. Jay Cutler. I mean, there's so many McCown. It just goes on. Moses Moreno. It's endless the number of them who have failed. Even Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky. So everybody is hoping Caleb Williams is the answer. And today he was terrible. They won because of the defense, and I believe, if you correct, that it was Simone Biles' husband who made the difference. He's a safety for the Bears, so he's Mr. Biles. So that's what they should call him. Um, but looking at that, the thing that I noticed about the Bears is that, and this is kind of how this whole story is, I'm going to piece this all together. Especially being here at the On Wednesday Club, which I knew about being an English literature major, not a journalism major. We'd studied Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Dostoevsky and all the great writers, and everybody knew that Daisy Buchanan was based on a member of On Wednesday Club. What was her name? Yeah, no, that Cummings. Yeah, that's it. King. And the other woman was, let me put this other, Edith Cummings, who was Jordan Baker in The Great Gatsby. So I remember that, and so this place is famous. But I also knew that Hemingway was Fitzgerald's buddy in a way that they have this odd competition, and they're such different people. Somehow I figured there's something going on here that has to do with football and writing, and all this kind of comes together in certain ways. And one thing, back to the quarterback situation, I actually looked this up, and Eric Kramer, if you remember him as a quarterback, I remember Eric, and Eric was actually a friend of mine, and what a story about Eric. But he still holds the record for most passing yards in Bears history. In 1995. These are some stats that I think will blow your mind. Um, he is the let's see here, where is it? Did I do the wrong thing? Or maybe it's the other side. Yeah, here we go. God, I cut out the wrong thing. Anyway, it's 3,883 yards. It's the most by any Bear, and there have been approximately 250 other quarterbacks or other games by its over 60 quarterbacks since that time to pass for more than 4,000 yards. It's absolutely stunning. The Bears are alone in this. There's no other team that hasn't passed for 4,000 yards. And Eric talked to him about it. He's just absolutely mystified that this could be the case, but it is. And I would guess that this year, the way we saw Caleb Williams start out, that it's not going to be broken this year. They play 17 games, so maybe something like that, something good will happen. The thing that I wanted to point out about Kramer, if you know his story, he's a great guy. But it's a very sad tale. And in a way, it has to do with football, it has to do with writing, it has to do with a lot of things. And this is his book, just came out called The Ultimate Comeback. And in this, he documents what happened to him. He was very good in 1995. He holds a passing yardage record and touchdowns with 29 for the Bears. He had a great year, and then the next year he didn't. He was terrible. And as he says, and I got to find his reading glasses will be the end of me. But anyway, I'll find this little part here where he's talking about why he wasn't any good that year. I think it's pertinent. Let's see that. Yeah, it's right. Let's see this one right here. Okay. All right, okay, get this. A couple of things here. You'd have it better. Anyway, this is the part also interesting about him. You think Eric Kramer would be a very confident young man? He said, "I grew up with anxiety, fear of failure, and little confidence. I was afraid of not being good enough at anything. If there was one positive from that, it was that the strong worth ethic I developed in my quest to always be better. But it wasn't the healthiest way to parent a shy kid simply looking for acceptance from his mom and dad. His dad kept pushing him to different high schools. He couldn't stay at the ones he wanted to where his friends were, kept moving him to places he didn't want to be. And anyway, uh, this is when he realized what his problem was. The moment it hit me in the car that day, I was psychologically transforming into the person you met in the first chapter. I wasn't thinking about how to help myself get out of this rut or survive each day. I was on a mission to remove myself from the equation. In my mind, the world didn't want me. If you know the story about him, his son Griffin was a high school quarterback out in California, and he overdosed on heroin with buddies, and he probably could have been saved. It's tragic the way it happened. They just kind of dropped him off at home, high school kids. And Eric spiraled into further depression, which he'd always suffered from. In '96, the reason he didn't do very well, the part I can't find, because he said I was dealing with an illness that I couldn't possibly deal with, depression, severe depression. So after his son died and other things went wrong with Eric, he's out in California. He he's got a sense of humor to this day. He bought a gun. He went to a firing range and practiced shooting it, a pistol. And he said to me afterwards, said to me now, he said, "Why do you need to practice at a firing range when you're going to shoot yourself?" He checked into a place called the Good Night Inn. He laughs about that too in Calabasas, California. He shot himself right here. The bullet went through his jaw, his tongue, out the top of his head. And he lived. And somehow he's back to being virtually normal. And when I talked to him, I've seen him several times, we've met up, and I said, "Eric, come, no, what's there?" And he shows a little scar right here. He's got a little bit of a list. And I said, "But the top of your head looks normal. Where's the scar there?" And he said, "Oh, got a whole new skull in it there." So he came back from that whole thing. And that's the quarterback who now is talking about why the Bears can't find a new quarterback who can beat his record. To me, it's just astounding. And nobody really knows that issue. He played at Detroit and was the only guy to win a playoff game until they did last year in the whole like history of the Lions in the modern Super Bowl era. And the quarterback who came after him, Eric Hipple, another quarterback, he also attempted suicide, jumping out of a moving car because of depression. And these guys, they got together and they're dealing with this. And one thing that I notice in these games, I love watching football. And these collisions are great. Something is always happening. And they did study Ernest Hemingway for CTE. And it's now with Ken Burns in this documentary. He may have had it. He had 5 tremendous concussions, 2 in airplane crashes that were back to back, I think in the same day. Another time when he was drunk and he thought he was pulling the chain for the toilet and he pulled the whole fan down on his head. Another time when he was in the airplane and he was bashing his head to get out because it was on fire. Um, the CT is something that in my career, writing about these athletes, see a lot of aberrant behavior. And then you find out afterwards, oh my God, when they do the studies at the Boston University, Dr. Ann McKee is kind of in charge of that, the CTE place out there, that they were brain damaged. And it seems very likely that Ernest Hemingway was brain damaged. And not only that, the other things that he had to go through, what strikes me, thinking about him and Fitzgerald, who also had his tremendous issues. Uh, how did these guys make it where they made it? And would they have done what they did if they weren't so damaged? Or is that part of what made them unique? And I'd like to think it isn't. I'd like to think if they had happy lives and lived long, they would have been able to do the same thing. Hemingway's problem started when he was a kid. His dad was a doctor, he had tremendous depression. He was bipolar. Even back then, I think they diagnosed it. He ended up killing himself. It's like 4 or 5 people in Hemingway's immediate family who committed suicide, and then including his granddaughter, Margot Hemingway, who was once a model. She was a Sports Illustrated bathing suit model. So there's something going on there, some mental aspect. But was was that what sparked Hemingway? His mother started out at the beginning dressing him as a girl. And it wasn't just like that she thought it was kind of cute. It was like she would introduce him or show him as his sister's sister. So Hemingway had this macho thing. When we think about Ernest Hemingway, who, by the way, the New York Times called the greatest writer since Shakespeare. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about how I know myself how he's changed writing. Everybody, every journalist, everybody I've ever known who writes, they're in the back of their mind is always Hemingway. How would he do this? What did he do? Uh, but when he was that kid, that little kid, and this macho stuff, catching giant fish, hunting animals in Africa, boxing, all these things that going to war that he had to do to like prove something. His first book, The Sun Also Rises, which was very influential to me. Actually, not when I read it first in college, but when I read it 20 years ago or whatever. It's a great book, and the main character is Jake Barnes, and it's these expatriates in Paris in the 20s, and they're kind of just they're lost. In fact, that's the early part of the book. Or there's a little transcript or whatever you call it, whatever comes at the beginning of a book from Richard Stein saying you are the lost generation. And in it, Jake Barnes, you just want him to consummate his love affair with Lady Brett Ashley, who's one of the coolest female characters ever written because she's beautiful. She hangs with the guys. She drinks. She goes to bullfights with them. Does all this stuff. And you're thinking, why? What is this all about? And you realize I didn't realize the first time I read the book, but the second and third time I did, I realized he was wounded in the war and he's impotent. So Hemingway's first main character is one who's emasculated. I don't think that any of that was by accident. There's a lot of things going on in Hemingway's books that when you start to parse them, you realize this wasn't the most macho guy in the world. This is the most terrifying guy in the world. And one thing I don't think people know about him, he had sons, and Patrick is still alive. I believe he's 93, 94, something like that. But he had a son named Gregory, and Gregory ended up changing his name to Gigi and becoming a woman. He was a doctor. He ended up dying in a jail cell in Miami in the late 80s, 1980s, I think it was. And he and his dad, there's some vicious letters back and forth between them. It was very sad. And so you're trying to think about what is all this identity stuff that's going on. If you don't know who you yourself are, very hard to write about other people. And what you'll see, what I found in all the writers that I like, I'll see more about that writer in the writing of what they're saying about a character than sometimes about that character themselves. It's a fascinating thing. And the other thing I wanted to show you was kind of quickly the way that there's an old saying that a good artist steal, a good artists borrow, great artists steal. And I think that's true. And this is, I happen to be reading the short stories of Hemingway. This is called Winter Take Nothing. And it's a collection from, it's almost 100 years old. So it's late, they were written in the late 20s, early 30s. And this is, of course, another guy that I love. A lot of you probably do. Cormac McCarthy's last book called The Passenger. It came a lot with two books, the other one called Stella Maris, but he just died. He did all the Pretty Horses and No Country for Old Men and The Road. All got made into movies. Of course, No Country for Old Men won the Oscar, done by the Coen brothers. I just happened to be reading Passenger. I'll start with that. It's a the plane goes down in shallow water, and it looks almost like a boat underneath because it's got the passenger windows. And this guy is diving down, the main character is diving down to see why this plane crashed, see what's in there. And as he comes to windows, he's going along and he says, this other character's name is Euler. Euler had cut away the latching mechanism and the door stood open. He was just inside the plane, crouched against the bulkhead. He gestured with his head. Bobby Western, who's the main character, pulled up in the door, and Euler shone in his light down the aircraft aisle. People sitting in their seats, their hair was floating, mouths are open, their eyes devoid of speculation. Turns over to there's the next one here. He mentions that again, hair floating on the passengers. Anyway, there's two times that he says it, and then this is a short story from Hemingway called After the Storm. It takes place in Key West, and it's a strange one. It starts in a bar. This guy's the main character's in a bar fight, and he leaves, and then he goes out diving for there's a wreck. And in Key West, that they was very wealthy for a long time, around the 1800s, early 1900s, for all the wrecks, salvaging stuff, and people made fortunes. So he's going to be the first guy to go out there in a little dinghy and see this wreck. It's a boat. I said, hold on for a second. Or I could hold on for a second to the edge of the porthole, and I could see in, and there was a woman inside with her hair floating all out. I could see her hair floating plain, and I hit the glass better. I guarantee you, Cormac McCarthy read that. Guaranteed. I don't know if anybody's ever put that together or if it's important. It probably isn't. But the idea of instead of it being a boat wouldn't sink nowadays, but an airplane would. You know, it's a mystery behind it. The same exact scene of a woman looking through a portal. She's obviously drowned and her hair floating in the stream. I found that exceptional. The other thing that I wanted to say to you very quickly, my tie gets cut, that um, the story about Geneva King and Fitzgerald, which marked change in his life. And of course, he said the classic line, you know, the rich are different from you and me. And what he was recognizing was something that was his great literature was about. And, you know, I just found that astounding for me to be coming here to the Valencia Club because that was the thing that got him. And I read a lot about Geneva King and who became Daisy Buchanan. I'm sure some people here might know, I don't know, relatives of her or her father, I mean, her kids or offspring or cousins or whatever. But it really is astounding the way, to me, literature comes all the way around. And because I have this book here, I thought I would read you just one of these poems. This is a story of this too, because all these things that I'm telling you about informed whatever I am not. It informed me, and I think almost any writer that you talk to, whether it was written for the Wall Street Journal, which terrific writer himself, right there. It's you nobody does something for the first time. You're always looking at somebody who did it before you, and then you do it differently. And Ernest Hemingway had that journalism training that he got at the Kansas City Star, which was a big deal. A lot of the things he brought to writing was the simplicity, just as Abraham Lincoln. Let's look at this up the other day. We've seen the Democratic stuff, the Republican stuff, and all the candidates blabber on and on and on, and they, oh God, they start getting a little comfortable, you know, and then you wish you had the Oscar music and oh, yeah, speech that we probably remember more than any other by an famous American. In my opinion, it might be the Gettysburg Address. 272 words, I believe. And it took massive cojones to do that. Because back then, the more powerful you were, the longer you spoke. Castro would speak for 6 hours, and you know, it was the guy that Lincoln was warming up for spoke for an hour. Do it. I think he was on stage only for less than 3 minutes. So something in your brain clicks. Now, people say there have been short talks before, not like that. So we do remember all the phrases from that. Anyway, I stole from just, I guess, all over the place. And this father and son thing, I'll leave that there. There's always been a theme. And this is this book. I don't know if you can see this. This is a painting by John Rush that he did just for this poem. This book took me 30 years to do. There's 42 original poems that I did, and 42 artists, different artists, who did original paintings. And I had to get in touch with each one of them. There are 4 different countries. I didn't know any of them. And well, actually, I knew Mark McMahon here in Lake Forest. And I don't know if I brought that other book. Yeah, here it is. Oh, man. Oh, wait, underneath here. Steve Trout, remember him, the old baseball pitcher for the Cubs? He and I did this book called The Magic Ball for kids. It's not really out yet. It's kind of out, but Mark McMahon did the cover. I talked to Mark, and he did a tornado and the balls in it and everything. It's very cool. Mark's a great guy. So Mark was one of the first. Then I got a guy that I kind of knew about named Tony Fitzpatrick. And then I would look at advertising books and I would look at magazines. I'd go to museums. Wherever there was art, if I saw something that really piqued my interest. I said, "Oh my God, I have to have that person do something." So I just called him on the phone. One of the best stories is this is just a couple of years ago, probably the last artist to do it in the 30 years. His name is Todd Telander, same last name. And I got a Google alert. It's modern times because I started this before modern times. And it said, Telander Gallery demolished by wayward driver. The date like Walla Walla, Washington. And it was that day. Oh my God. It was from some little newspaper that I just happened to be hooked up to through Google. I said, God, I think I'm related to that guy. So I looked it up real fast, found the Telander Gallery in Walla Walla, where I've never been, and I saw a phone number. I dialed it. This all happened within 5 minutes. And I called it, and this guy answers, and I said, Todd? Or he says, I said, Todd? He said, yeah. I said, well, my name's Rick Telander, and I got to tell you, I'm really sorry about your studio, your art place being demolished. But while you're fixing it up, would you mind doing a painting for me? So he did. He said, sure. And it's a beautiful one in here. But the stories of how I got each artist is pretty, I couldn't do it again. I got to tell you, cold calls. I felt like a telemarketer, but I became friends with all of them. In fact, Judy and I just visited one in a little town called Tone, England. It's about 80 miles west of London. And I found this guy because he had illustrated a second edition of a great old book called The Wind in the Willows with Mr. Toad and Mole and Badger and Ratty. And he did these animals, you see the fur, and they're all wearing, coats and ties and ascots. And Mr. Toad's just a lunatic, lives in Toad Hall. He's always doing something crazy. I said, this guy, I've got a poem for this guy. I got to get him. And I did. I called him. Finally, somehow I got his number, did an international call. And we visited him and his wife and his two kids. And we went around. This is after he'd done the painting. And now we're best buds. And Judy and I are going back to London in about 2 weeks, not to see him, but I think we will. He's got two little kids. I gave him two Northwestern hoodies. They wear them everywhere because nobody's got that bright purple over there. So that's how I make friends. And so 42 of them here. All right. So I'm just going to read you this poem, and I'm sure you can see the parallels to a lot of things that came before. And as you can see, I don't know if you can, this right up here is a man carrying, you can see a little face, a little head coming over the top. He's got a great coat on, and it's snow. The wind is blowing. You can tell it's a stormy night, but it's not. It's clear and stormy. It's called Night Journey. One night, my father held me close when I was tired and longed to sleep. He buttoned me into his coat and walked the path unlit and steep. He held me to him with an arm. Cold wind tore the sky apart. He was proof against the storm, and I became his beating heart. So that's one of them. And, I wrote that, and John Rush, I got a hold of him. He does these epic kind of paintings. And I asked him just recently, John, how did you do that? He said, well, I had a friend of mine pose. I took a photo. I'm down low on the ground, looking up, and I had a fan blowing his coat. And he didn't have a little kid, but he had that, and that's what he used for his model. I just find these artists, things they could do fascinating. Um, that's about all I have. I do have, I don't know if you want any of these books. I brought some. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. I bought them. They cost $20. You can get them online if you want. If you want one, we're here. I can autograph them. If you don't, I completely understand. And that's it. Now take questions if you want. So anything else?
Yeah, I don't have questions.
No. And if there are no questions, no, we're here.
What are some of the people in your wide-ranging career that you particularly admire? Who are a couple of people?
Well, I'll tell you what, I always liked Steve Kerr a lot. He was always hilarious. People don't know, but a friend of mine, Mike Silver, is a long time, worked for Sports Illustrated. Now he's doing stuff for NFL TV or something. But he and Kerr were both columnists for their paper, Pacific Palisades, I think, in California. And I said to Mike, I said, what was yours? He said, well, I was writing about sports. I said, what was Kerr's? He said, it was gossip, high school gossip. He had a high school gossip. See, he was the funniest guy in the world. He lived, I don't know if you guys knew him, but he just lived right on in the ponds there. And one time I remember Judd Bushler played for the Bulls, and Judd was, a backup. He was but he had some characters. He was a surfer dude from uh, San Diego or La Jolla, around, somewhere there. And he talked like, oh man, it's gnarly. I talk like that. So one time after a game, they'd hand out the sheets of their stats on it. The Bulls always be sitting around looking at the stats, obviously looking at their own, whatever. Not supposed to, supposed to look at the team stats. But anyway, they'd look at their own. And I remember Whistler had like 4 points and 3 rebounds and an assist in 6 minutes of playing, or 7 minutes, something like that. And Kerr's looking at it. It's a, this is a problem. I would only play 48 minutes. He'd be averaging 72 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists, and he threw the thing out. I mean, he'd already multiplied exactly the amount of minutes that if he just played a full game. But that's the kind of guy Steve Kerr is. I like that a lot. I still like him. I think he's won 8, 9 championships. I don't even know how many with the Bulls or the Spurs, and now being a coach of the Warriors. Of course, I can't leave out Michael Jordan. I mean, probably some of you played golf with him, and if you did, you probably took his money. So what I've heard, he always thinks he's a better golfer than he is. But I just being around him, everybody knows how great a player he was, and everybody knows how vicious he could be to people. To opponents. Like, don't try to do anything on him because he'll come back and just no matter how low echelon you are, if you do something to him to humiliate him or something, you'll never hear the end of it. And one of the reasons I started the Sun Times in 1995 was because in 1994, shortly after Jordan had retired from basketball, the Bulls had won 3 championships. His father had been murdered. He quit, and people were like aghast. He's going to play baseball, and in the White Sox organization, because Jerry Reinsdorf owned the White Sox and the Bulls, was a part owner, and they had the Birmingham Barons was their AAA team, I think, double AAA. So Jordan was down there, and Sports Illustrated in it was '94, late '94, I guess it was. Put on the cover, Michael in a Barons uniform swinging at a pitch and missing it by like about that much. And then it says underneath it, it says, "Bag it, Michael." Michael Jordan and the White Sox embarrass baseball. And I saw that. And I said, "Oh God, you did." I mean, I was outraged because I knew what would happen. Well, the short order of it is, Jordan said, "I don't think I'll ever talk to Sports Illustrated again," and that was almost 30 years ago. And he hasn't. The greatest basketball player ever, one of the greatest athletes ever, and he will not talk. Do you think he bears a grudge? So I was not going to stay at Sports Illustrated. I knew Michael pretty well. I wasn't going to stay there and not be able to talk to this guy in my own town. So that's when I drifted off to the Sun Times. There was the Tribune wanted me to join. There was a lot of churn back then of grabbing sport columnists and stuff like that. So the Jordan, and then another one that always comes back to me is um, Walter Payton, and I used to spend some time with him, and I know he was ADHD. I mean, beyond. And you guys, I don't know. Again, I'm talking to people who probably know him or have dealt with him, but he was always moving. And I'd be talking to him. He said, "Come on, Ray, come on, talk, let's go." One time we were playing golf at the Super Bowl. He wasn't playing in it, but it was after it. And we're playing golf just so I can talk to him. And I'm interviewing him, and he's swinging, and he's got a phone that's got a thing in his ear, a little microphone here. He's talking to somebody on the phone. He's talking to me. He's swinging, and I remember he's talking then periodically in Spanish to the guy who's raking the green. Like, oh my God! But he lived his life at 1,000 miles an hour, and I remember we got along quite well. And towards the end, he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, we're having a dinner with some guys out at the Roundhouse, I think near Aurora, whatever place restaurant that he owned." And I knew he was sick. And I went out, and it was Matt Shuey was there, and about four or five other players from his era. And we sat there, and he sat next to me. We all ordered food, and he ordered. He didn't touch a thing on his plate. I remember at one point he reached over and grabbed one of my French fries, which is typical Walter, and just ate a little bit of it. And of course, he had liver cancer, liver. It was just awful. He was shrinking down to nothing, and bile duct cancer, I think is what they called him. He died not long after that. But I'll never forget that. It was they call it sweetness. He would try to show how much he liked you, or if he did like you, by doing things like pinching your leg so hard that it leave a bruise, you know, or like lighting a firecracker behind you, or something like that. So anytime there was a loud noise like that at Barry's camp, they knew it was Walter Payton behind it. The other characters we've had here, I mean, I just can't listen to all Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause and Sammy Sosa. It's just astounding characters in and of themselves. Sosa, this guy who was nothing, came out of the Dominican, he used to sell, I think he went past sixth grade. And whatever he did, I mean, he used to sell things on the corner, sell like Coke or stuff like that to tourists or whatever. That was Sammy Sosa, who becomes one, other than Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds, really more home runs than anybody in a season. And yet he's in the thick of that whole steroid thing. And sometimes I used to like Sammy, knowing what he had to overcome and speaking. He spoke English very well, even though at the end he pretended he didn't. And thinking about it, okay, it's easy to condemn this guy, but what would I do if I were that little shoeshine boy from Dominican? Bill Jackson, I remember when he played and him being from, again, going back to fathers and sons, that how important that stuff is. His parents were real um, evangelical Christians in, I think, in South Dakota, a small town. And so he always had that element to him. Everything was spiritual with him, even when he was just crazy. And he would go around in the Bulls locker room with, lighting sage and walking around and smoke's going around. And you got guys like Scottie Pippen looking up, Dennis Rodman, But the other ones understood it. And he changed coaching as much as anybody's ever changed it. There's a book called Sacred Hoops. It's a really good book if you ever want to read about the side of coaching that nobody has said before him. Respecting the enemy, understanding the enemy, calming yourself, deep breathing, all this visualization, all this stuff that sounded new age and hippy dippy. Now everybody does it, and it works. And he also would do this thing I found fascinating. Every Christmas, he'd give every player in his team a book, and not the same book. He picked out a book for each one of the players that he thought they would like. And I mean, like he'd give a couple to Steve Kerr, and he'd give novels. He'd give it could be some fact-based book, nonfiction. And I said, Phil, what do you think? What do you think the readership was on? In one year, he didn't get Jerry Krause one at all. Didn't get him one. There was a real dynamic there. He said, well, some of the guys take the books, and I know they read them. They're on the bus, they're reading them. And then other times, I'll hear this like dunk in the garbage can, as I walk 10 seconds away. He said, but no matter what, they always know that I was thinking about them. And Phil is a distant guy. You think that'd be a warm and fuzzy guy, but he told me one time, he said, I'm not a people person. Very complex person. And then you have Jerry Krause, this little guy who, in one of the photos from Taft High School, the baseball team, it's got the names of every player. They're all there, and it says unidentified boy. Everything about Jerry Krause was chip on his shoulder, not a chip. It's like a tree on his shoulder, and you could sense that all the time. And ultimately, it led combined again, going back to the Hemingway thing. How much would Hemingway have written had he been well adjusted and loved and all that? Bulls won 6 championships because of Krause. Then they were destroyed because of Krause. Because he had this character on the team named Michael Jordan that nobody'd ever had before. Nobody'd ever had a person like him. And Krause never got over the fact he came in 1985 and Jordan came to the Bulls in 84. So it's like you've got everybody in this big electric factory. You're making gazillions of dollars, and the whole world knows about you, and you hired everybody but Thomas Edison. So you pick up on these psychological elements, which is fascinates me about sports. Scores are out there; anybody can see them. High school kids, grade school kids know more about sports than I do. If they just want to focus on one thing, it's all on your phone, find everything. We used to trundle around massive amounts of media guides, and if you wanted a simple fact, who was the leading scorer in NFL history? It was harder than hell to find out. Now it's like that, it's done. So I don't know if that answers your question about the guys that I remember, but there's four of them right there.
Very good answer.
Yeah.
How about George House?
I didn't know George where our house was. He was there. We were right at the end zone, and one time a roof faced him. And having driven to the south from Peoria, where I grew up with my family, we'd go all the way to Georgia, where my grandparents lived. And we'd go through places like, and on the barn siding, go through Tennessee or whatever, and say, see Rock City, things like that. And I was always impressed, like, God, huge white letters. Like, Mom, what's Rock City? Or see some kind of cave. Or one time we were headed out west and it said, see Wall Drugstore, for hundreds of miles. And another one I remember, it wasn't on a house, but it was a great big sign that said, "See the world's largest." What was it? Oh, God. Was it chipmunk? No, it wasn't a chipmunk. It was what those little things that come out of the ground? Huh?
Prairie dog.
Who? Prairie dog. Prairie dog. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. See the world's largest prairie dog, and little Ricky is 11 years old. I God, gotta go. We gotta go. We have to see it. I have to see it. My sisters are saying, we're driving out. We're going to Yellowstone, or God knows where we're going, the Black Hills or something. So we go up detour so you can see the world's largest prairie dog. And I mean, this is a good lesson. This is how you learn what life's about. You go in, you pay like 10 cents, and there's some guy, there's a fence kind of a guy with few teeth or whatever. Where's the biggest prairie dog? I'm just quivering because I loved animals. I was always collecting them. And it's over there. And I went over and I was like, where? And you're looking at a kid, and there's a plaster thing with painted, not very well, about this high, prairie dog. Uh, so anyway, that was a lesson I never forgot. Anyway, back to my original story. On our house, it faced the Bears practice field. I knew that because I'd been on their field. I thought, you know what? I'm going to paint. They won the Super Bowl. Painted the score on there, 46-10. Huge white letters, big roller ahead. This guy was doing work on a bathroom and putting in a skylight. They could get up there. The roof was steep. It was like that. We had like a two-story house, two and a half. I don't even know what you'd call it. Old farmhouse, over 100 years old, 1880 or something like that. And so you could get up there, but we used a roller to do it, put 46-10 in. And Dick, I saw him up and said, yeah, that's okay. And they looked at it every practice. And then the next year they lost to the Redskins. And he came to me and he said, it pisses me off seeing the score of the Super Bowl. That's in the past. So, unbeknownst to him, or not telling him, got black paint painted over that and put the score 13-27 up there. Okay, so he looks at this for like couple months, I said, get that goddamn score up. So I said, and I meant this, I said, Coach, listen, I would, but it's too steep. You need a special kind of roof ladder. I don't have one. You can't go up on a regular ladder and get up there. I said, if you can paint it, you can do it. I mean, if you guys can do it. One day, not that much long after that, I heard, and there's that one of those cherry pickers the Bears had. And it's way up 2 stories, and it leans over the fence. That's how close our house was. And the bucket goes out this as far as it can go. And Mitch Friedman, their camera guys, got a long pole and black paint, and that was the end of the score. That's how close we were. And when we moved in, Bob Thomas was the kicker, and he's now with Supreme Court, right? Yeah, those kickers. Anyway, and when they do 2-minute drill, and they come down the field, and and they kick, and the ball would hit the roof of our house because they had a screen behind the goalpost, but it wasn't very high, and so we ended up with a lot of footballs that have this CB stamped into them. Some I threw back, others I didn't. So that was pretty cool living right there.
Of all the various wonderful leading athletes in the great Chicago sports scene, I'm thinking of some of the ones you mentioned. Gordon, the best of all, you think, in terms of
Well,
winning skill set,
yeah,
tenacity?
probably. You know, he ran a 4.4 40. You can imagine what kind of wide receiver he could have been. He was a spectacular athlete. Just to see him, kind of his shoulders are this wide, and they had those coats that were real wide. His hands are gigantic. His arms are long, his legs are long. He was muscular and lean and quick and fast. And he never really practiced a 3-point shot. So you can't really factor that in. It was only that one game, I think made 6 or 7 of them where he just shrugs and look at the camera like, I don't know why. The 3-pointer wasn't what it is nowadays, like Steph Curry. It's just,
Unbelievable.
that guy's beyond. But I've never seen excitement like when people were at the United Center or even the old stadium to see Jordan. And I remember at his peak, he didn't complain about his salary for a long time. He was only making, I don't know, $1 or $2 million, something like that. And they played in Georgia. They were playing the Atlanta Hawks, and they played at the Hawk Dome or whatever it's called. I'm not sure. And they had 55,000 people because it was a regular season game to come and see Jordan. And extra, normally they'd have like 16,000. So there's 40,000 people almost coming just because of him. And I went to Paris when they went over there for this tournament, and the French went just absolutely nutty over it. I remember he called what do you call it? He called the Louvre, the Luge thing. But the other thing I remember about him, and again, it goes back to that cover, Maggot Michael. Michael Jordan embarrassed his face. And I said, don't never use the word embarrass in the same sentence with him. Even if he deserves it, don't use it. 2 years before that, he'd been named the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year. And there was a hotel called the Hotel Nico. I think it's gone now or whatever. And that was downtown, kind of the north side, and they had Sports Illustrated had a big luncheon for him. All the swells were there, and advertising people, people who, I don't know, well, salesmen mostly, but it was a huge perk. Anybody who worked for Sports Illustrated or had anything to do with their income. And so the place was packed, probably 200 people. Jordan came in with Juanita, and I mean, he looked magnificent. Being Crothers was a big deal. And, you got to understand that men could be peacocks back then. But, in a, Italian cut suit, whatever, all the ties, that still ties. And I remember that movie American Gigolo came out way back with Richard Gere and all this music, and he's just laying out his clothes like, what? Anyway, that was Jordan. He looked magnificent. He came in, they had a Illustrated magazine. It was black and red, and it was a hologram. I think the first one anybody ever put on a magazine. So if you look at it, his eyes followed you. I still have a couple, and he had pens, big markers that were silver. So he was inscribing them. They had all these. Everybody had a cover. I think everybody in the whole place at where they were sitting, and he signed every single one of them. Wrote something there. He worked the room. He had a smile. People were just like, uh, the women were aghast, and the men were, in awe. And I realized he could understand things at that emotional IQ, if you want to call it this spatial recognition, this understanding. He could look at this room and think, who do I need to talk to? Which one of you guys is the bell cow? And all of you, it'd be really tough here, or which women runs the place. But he would figure it out. And I said that translated to how he played basketball. He figured things out that I don't think he could even express that we wouldn't know. It enabled him to do what he did. I remember they were opening a James Jordan Boys and Girls Club near the stadium, near the United Center, and Mayor Daley was still the mayor. They had a big reception during the day, and we're going around. And a couple media guys are there just tagging along, and Jordan and other dignitaries, probably state senators and all these other kind of politicians, and there's people in each room. who was going to be there, do whatever, like in the gym, there's a gym instructor. It's a brand new structure. We finally get to this one room, the art room. And there's a young woman in there who's going to be the art instructor. She's petrified. I mean, you can almost see her shaking like this. She's just, straight out of college or whatever, and this is a big job for her. And to see these people like was freaking her out, and yet she had to talk. And so she's saying, "We're going to paint, and I'll be, paying to get here. Maybe we'll have some play, on the floor." But anyway, and then she kind of stopped, and Jordan said, could have been anybody, he says, "In other words, this room will never be this clean again." Everybody laughed, including her. All of a sudden, she was normal. Who else would have done that? I mean, that stuck in my mind. It's like, didn't have to be him. Could have been Mayor Daley. Could have been any of the other people. Say something to this poor woman who's petrified. And Jordan said it. And so those are the kind of things I remember, you know. Uh, yeah. So anybody else is dying? I'll be here, so I'm not going anywhere.
Rick,
Please come up and keep a question if you want to share about it. Please come up and please let him autograph one of his fantastic books.
Sure. Twofold. I'm 93, so I've been around for a long time, reading, and living through all the things we've talked about. I think it wouldn't be a general literature. I don't know. I won't ask you feel things. Feels good. It's so great. Minnesota, we felt the purple big wages.
Yeah.
The great line, offensive deep kingdom. First, you built great offensive deep line in 85. I remember when he went to New Orleans, and he did the same thing. It seemed to me, you're fairly capable quarterbacks who never had any time in the pocket for the last 15 years.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, you watch Brady with New England. He has 5 seconds to sit back and look around.
It's really unfair to judge quarterbacks just by what they do.
Absolutely annihilate. I was kind of hoping they think the first pick you get the best left tackles available in the country.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's not as sexy as that quarterback. You know? And if they think he's the guy, you got to keep first pick. You don't get that chance again. And if he went on to be Tom Brady somewhere else, but you're right. Tom Brady came back there to catch the ball.
We could have had Patrick Mahomes.
Okay. Who wanted him? Somebody.
That's just unbelievable.
And also could have had Deshaun Watson. It turns out not to be such a great guy.
I know.
That's like what's called stuff. But those two guys, we took Mitchell Trubisky. Well,
So what did I going to
you know what?
They hadn't even
Yeah, no. I don't know. No. I mean, maybe drafted, but he only played like 17 games in college. So they really thought, general manager, Ryan, whatever. Oh, yeah. He thought, I've done something. I'm trying to remember me forever. You know more than I do.
I love sports. So, remember me? I'm Susan. West. Oh, and I look up to you so much when we were in school.
Oh my God.
It's not too, because
She was
we live in town.
going to come. We got a total chance yesterday. She feels like a kid. No, I don't know. Sorry. One, I mean, I want to say that. We're going to England, so I was like, yes. Oh, no, it's great. Who are your pals back in England? Well,
So I was,
Sadie's was the coolest.
well, I don't know about that, but I
Ever go out?
was Jeannie Valentine. Boston, I can't remember.
Faded.
Valentine?
I remember, you really called the Big Ho, Jeannie Oppenheimer.
Although I do.
Who's the photo who was a model? Oh, I remember going to
She was
photos on the wall.
beautiful.
All beautiful, yeah.
Dark hair.
Yeah.
So you're younger. I think you're older than I am.
Yeah, I'm 71, class 71.
And I'm 70. So you were here.
You're good.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So you
Bailey was in her?
Bailey, exactly.
I know, way back. She married a guy,
She married Pete.
Pete Johnson.
And you were great friends, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, still in
Exactly.
a band. We played in Peoria about a month ago.
Play in that band.
And Pete comes back and says,
Nelson's birthday. Do you remember
Who?
playing in Chris Nielsen's birthday? Yeah, Chris, we still see some long.
You know, oh, Nielsen. So it's a Nielsen party.
Yes. Yeah. We go.
I remember first time we played for Nielsen was actually at his house.
It was, and
I think
when
somebody spilled down the grand piano or something like that, you know. We tried, but it was so much fun.
was so much fun. And he and Bill McNiff had that birthday party together every single.
Yeah. Okay, he was such a happy guy.
Like Adam Lever. I mean, it's a relatively good team.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
were there.
No, no. You know,
Rory Daniels.
I forgot it. Yeah, Morgan, I forgot. My senior year, Alex Coach was named the
Yeah,
AP Coach of the Year. He went 6-4. He went 6-1 in the Big Ten, but they thought, if you can do that at Northwestern, oh my God. To the year. National Coach of the Year. Yeah, well,
also very, I mean, we've had moments in time.
yeah.
The academics.
It'll never be Ohio State. I mean, we've got like 200,000 alums out there.
The academic requirements.
No, right? Hey, everybody.
Well, this is my husband, Steve.
Oh, you remember that from him? Is that right?
You better get your eyes.
Data. I'm thinking Jerry. You know.
Yeah, well,
Here we just bouncing back time for us.
we all started and it was the most conservative place in the world, and then it changed overnight. It was a very
I
strange
think the
time.
first place we ever played, right at the start of the one, right in the state house. Actually, a photo of it that was in the Daily Northwestern. In Berlin, Ron Fuller, our senior, had his barefoot wearing little jean shorts, no shirt on. You
This
know,
was post Kent State.
yeah.
Like,
It was right after, the year after. And then,
everything changed.
you know, my dad, when he started running back, probably, you know, what year he was.
Hated it. Kathy Feening, a friend.
Yes, that, yeah. Guardsmen and stuff. But we knew that it was the guys who were flunked out and was trying to go around. Strange, very strange time. And our coach Alex is a nice guy, but he's a real to the game. You know, he's been in hand-to-hand combat and Iwo Jima.
You've got to
Oh,
hire
yeah. Well, we trying to understand everybody. That was difficult.
Yeah, it was a very strange. So, yeah.
No, they got rid of the draft in '73, and all of a sudden, protests were done. War was basically down. Since then, that was 50 years ago. No young man was drafted unless he wanted to go.
I know, and which is a shame in some ways. It's like,
It is a shame. You know what I've always thought we should have. Now,
my oldest son, like that, that's fine. So,
I think people could, you have to do national service. It could be the military job, but if it's not the military, you do charity work, you do some city, you build things, or it's almost like the Peace Corps. But you have to do it. Everybody, every American. Here.
I think.
And I always said, I'm there.
Did you serve?
No, I didn't. I got it by the time, 71, all that stuff. And actually, the guy went to Kansas City and I had really high blood pressure. I had no idea. That's when the first time I found out. And disqualified.
Steve had the same experience. He got, he had a medical condition that happened to be in his draft report.
Yeah.
You're done. You're
Yeah,
through.
well, then, if you get, so they weren't even looking at me until almost 72, and then, oh, look at that. You know, I signed it.
I don't have $20 with me.
No, it's.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do you want?
I'd love to have you.
Whoever you give it to, they write, they see this is old school. This one, I can, let me sit down, I can do it right here.
So this is for me.
It's a beautiful book, I gotta tell you. These artists,
Yeah, I just went.
he gave me this poem called Fever.
Uh-huh.
This
No,
guy,
the
this guy,
illustration is
this guy is in Milwaukee right now with his Tim Anderson. He's amazing. Where's all of these, man? This guy's a tattoo artist, famous tattoo artist. Went to art school. He just died. This one. People say it's that upside down. No, it's right side up. And he usually do very sexualized things like women and stuff, and he this kind of thing, amazing stuff. He's done stuff for over $100,000.
So you just have probably those you-
Oh yeah, and the crazy thing is a bio.
Oh, wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful, great, because I can.
It's really nice to look and see who they all are.
There's one.
Okay, so who am I doing this for?
So Cash and K,
CASH.
looks like Cash, and then Jake's.
I do this very carefully because names are really weird.
Yeah, I know they are.
I had to sign books one time in the Bronx at a public school. Well, I got kid's name was Xavier. He started with a Q, I think.
Oh, no.
And then Ross.
Okay, so it's Cash, like real cash.
Cash money.
Cash money. CSS. And then K. C-A-D-E. C-A-D-E.
How old is it?
They're turning 8 in March. Yeah.
Well, that's like this. I mean, I tell you, even adults, you can,
Oh, I'm gonna go through it.
to get each one of these artists to do something, these are, none of them are archived. Like, this one, stuff
That's
Disney.
beautiful.
This is great. But I did sketches for most of them. Except that, yeah, we talked. 'Cause they wanted some kind of, so,
And how long did this?
30 years.
30.
Started, you can look it up online. The oldest one is for Susan. Yeah,
I know,
next one is
we're late.
38. I hadn't waited.
Because Campbell, your daughter and Campbell, the full 100-year-old, or 900-year-old one.
What are you?
But Campbell wants, but he went away before.
Oh,
But
okay.
came back and I still can't.
You think you know? Laura, you've been watching.
Laura,
Thank you,
okay.
thank you so much.
Okay, here's the $20.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I
I'll do a little wink, wink, maybe, as I heard at a country club on the North Shore. Rumor has it.
Here.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely. Because I don't have any grandchildren. So,
They were number one.
but I'm sure I'll have.
You just want your Susan?
Susan's fun.
Okay. The whole thing, Susan.
Yeah, that's like.
That's like, okay, again,
Oh, yeah.
old school Susan.
Old school Susan, and old Susan.
No. You look good. Some people look hungry too.
The body parts, you're telling me. That's the
No,
only.
we're gonna talk about that.
Tennis sports, yours.
Yeah.
But that's it, you wear them out. Like 40,000 miles, I think, about on tires is a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I never got hurt playing football, really badly. Huh?
You were lucky.
I know. I ruined my knees playing pickup basketball on asphalt.
Oh, and you don't have any concussions. Because something like that, I might have a big issue with that.
Fortunately, we played a lot of man-to-man, twice running a lot,
Yeah.
rather than just coming up and getting blasted. I didn't like it. I didn't like hurting my head. I really didn't.
Well,
And shouldn't I, Earl has had some hockey related concussions and they can't
They just stay away from the head.
exactly, but they don't.
No, they don't. And the problem is your head's in the middle of your shoulders. How do you tackle something?
I know. Well, it's so nice to see you.
Well, it's good
And I'm
seeing
sorry that Judy didn't come. I would have liked to.
I know, man. She's honestly, she had a new dress and everything. She feel like she's lying on her couch with a
I'm sorry.
She really reacts badly to these shots, like flu shots and this. Oh, bad, but not that bad.
Because I don't usually, we're fine.
As soon as if you think of anybody else, that I know, just let me know. I love hearing about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say.
Okay.
Your nephew Brad right now is
Robinson.
a 3-point guy. Okay, never mind.
What's his name?
Duncan Robinson
He plays for the Heat.
for the Heat.
3-pointer.
Three-pointer.
Is he rookie or
Wasn't he? Now he's going to be
Second year?
5-year maybe.
Duncan?
Almost into his big fat
They got that guy.
$1 million.
Oh, Brad. Right. Totally, Brad. That's your mom or dad's.
Dad. To myself.
How tall?
Yeah. 6'7".
You're tall.
Smart kid. Very, very
Where'd he
smart
go?
kid.
School.
He started off, he is totally the unsung hero. So he was this tall in high school.
And I love basketball. I love basketball. And he would practice, 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 practice. And he did a gap year or PG year at Exeter because he lived in New Hampshire.
And where?
In Exeter. In New
Oh, at
Hampshire,
Exeter.
like
Okay,
boarding
yeah,
school.
sure,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So he took an extra year so he could grow kind of. And then he was recruited for D1. So he went to Williams, D3.
Oh, sure.
And they won the championships
Yeah,
that
no,
year.
Williams is great.
Great.
The guy came to,
Everything.
Morty Shapiro came to Northwestern, their president.
He
He
came from
just
Williams?
retired. Huh?
I never
Yeah,
knew
he came
that.
from Williams. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I never knew
And
that.
everybody, Williams was well known
Amazing.
for
Yes.
D3 as good as
Yes.
it got.
Yes. Yes.
So
So
then,
he went there. He went to Williams his first year. Then they went to the D3 finals. They didn't win, but anyway. So now he's got some attention on him. And then, what was his name? Beeline coach leaves and goes to an NBA team. I can't remember which team. So now Duncan's kind of looking around and he decides he loves Michigan. So he goes to
University of Michigan.
University of Michigan. So
I'm going to
they
remember
become-
this kid. I know I will if
Yeah,
you
you will.
tell me more about it.
Yeah. So again, not, so he goes to Michigan and they go to the NBA championships against
NCAA, yes.
NCAA.
Yeah, I
sorry.
remember.
Yeah. And but they lose. So he's been to like all these championships, but they lose every time. Then in the bubble, so then
At least they
he's
get
not
there.
not recruited or not drafted. He's like, okay, 60 guys go to the draft. I guess I was like number 61. Oh, again, not drafted. It gets kind of a backdoor deal with this agent called Glue. Sean is his name, this young hot guy. And he plays in the G League for the Heat. And he can go up 45 times. So they bring him up and then he gets a 1 year or whatever contract.
Sure.
And then they sign him. And then I think that was just after they were in the bubble when they went.
Yeah, well, see, I lost track of a lot of stuff during the bubble.
Yeah.
They got that guy Hero,
Yeah.
who's nobody knows who he was either.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very
No,
cool.
they all know.
So how much was
So
his,
he was a
what he
3
just signed for?
how many years? You would know this. How many years ago did Duncan sign his?
Did he sign
Four?
a 5-year deal?
He signed a
I'm
5-year
not,
deal.
maybe a year.
But I don't know where he is. He might be at the
So-
end of it.
I don't
$90
think
million.
he's there yet.
93 million.
$90 million.
Huh?
Mhm.
Million.
But then he gets stuck on the bench. And I learned from him, it was most interesting to learn. I never realized that other players have an impact on the coach and like the general manager and stuff. It's like Jimmy Butler. I didn't realize how much he drove the bus. Apparently.
Oh, God, yes.
Oh my God. Whoa.
They have more security than the coach or the general manager.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he sat out for a little while.
You know, say anything.
Nobody paid.
Jimmy didn't like Duncan?
He didn't like that he really could not play defense.
Ah.
So he's really bad at this.
Mm.
But he would sit there patiently. He's very good at his public image. He would not
Defense,
just
you
spit it
know,
out.
speaking of Jimmy Butler, I remember I was at the Berto Center when they first brought him in, and he came in as like the what do you call it, the blind side?
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
where comes in with his white mother,
Mhm.
Jimmy Butler, black to be, she's got long blonde hair, wearing a cocktail, just really hot, high 3-inch heels. I'm like, oh, it's this little press conference here. We're not going to the ball. Jimmy's there, and he just kind of, that's like mom.
Yeah.
It's before the blind side, and it was like one of those things where he got thrown out of his house and they adopted him.
Yeah.
He was a
Yeah, like
teenager.
15. Yes.
Yeah.
Out of it. Yeah.
So
He's
I
got.
don't think he doesn't have issues,
Maybe
Then Doug
right?
grew up in Newcastle, New Hampshire, which is like an island off the coast of New Hampshire.
Oh
So
my
for a long
God.
time, they're like, poor guy. He had 8 people in his class only. Like, I don't know if he can read and write. He had like no running water, some island in the middle of the ocean off of New Hampshire. Yeah, not so much.
Not exactly.
Then somebody went to interview him and they're like, oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
I see.
yeah. Think of that. How different is that from growing up in the inner city in Dallas or Houston or something?
we had a nice block party for the Heat last year, 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you for listening to my.
Oh, yeah, no, that's good. That's how I learn stuff. Very interesting. I'll look for now. What do you think? Are they going to let him play or just bring him in
This is
for?
your type.
3-point shooting.
Starman? No, I Rick just here.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking, you know, you could think once that was from the event last night, and if they just, I don't know.
I work at a community center. I'll leave them around. Yeah.
Okay. I know all this art's on display for 3 more weeks at gallery down in Chicago. That's if you read the back of that.
Okay.
Maria Vec, Bill Vec's daughter,
Oh, wow.
is her studio, her gallery.
Have you ever interviewed Mike?
Oh, yeah.
Interviewed him once, yeah,
Yeah.
great guy.
My
It's related to Posey.
That's a
somehow.
good, the yarn, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And Mike had a daughter back then who had an eye issue, and she's like in her 20s.
A lot of sadness. Maria's been to 5 funerals in her family. She's really, you know, a lot of pain in their family.
Right, yeah.
And her being a girl, I think she had a sister that's about it. You know, it's all macho guys. And,
Oh, yeah.
you know, Bill, she loved Bill. She's always telling stories
Right.
about him. But, you know, it was tough for her.
Yeah, so he was the owner of the White Sox. He had like a wooden leg, and he was a cigarette out in his
Yeah,
leg.
an accident.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, would you like a drink a lot or like?
Oh,
And then he said, well, just like Captain Blackbeard. You sit, you know, you sit in the outfit and take his shirt off.
oh yeah, at Wrigley Field. Well, his father planted the ivy there.
Yes.
Do you want me to?
There's more stuff.
Okay.
Gotta make sure we have everything.
Look, no, that's not my bag.
Is it, this isn't yours?
No,
Okay. Perfect.
You're all set.
I got it all.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. You want me to? Okay, I'll take one. I'll take what you're having. Thank you.
We'll have one for you. No, you. Thankful.
Well, are you still riding or did you?
I am. Well, so speaking, well, I'm running to go to an olive farm. You must.
Oh, yeah.
Go farm.
My daughter got married.
No, yes.
Oh, yeah, great.
It might be a good interview because I'm gonna talk shit.
Hey, that's what you want to be. That's Jim Blount. Right here. Look at that. Okay, expect those.
Oh, yeah.
Travis White. Beautiful. Wow.